This story was submitted by a woman we'll call Rowan. And it starts at 11:47 on a Thursday night, in a one-bedroom apartment with thin walls and a kitchen light that flickered when the upstairs neighbor ran the shower, with Rowan sitting on the edge of her bed reading a message on her phone that her mother had written about her to 43 members of her extended family. The message was in the family group chat. The big one: aunts, uncles, cousins, second cousins, people Rowan hadn't seen since childhood but who were kept in the loop because her mother, Nadine, treated the family tree like an audience. Nadine was turning 60. And the message was an announcement. A formal invitation to a birthday celebration, dinner at a private venue, dress code enforced, followed by a weekend at a rented villa. The kind of event Nadine organized not because she enjoyed the company but because she enjoyed the display. The head count was the point. The photographs were the point. But the message wasn't just an invitation. It was a declaration. Nadine wrote, and Rowan screenshotted this, which becomes important later, that the celebration was for family who have chosen to live with dignity and purpose. She wrote that she had made the difficult decision to exclude certain individuals who do not reflect the values this family stands for. She didn't use Rowan's name. She used a phrase that was worse. She called Rowan and her 4-year-old daughter the lowly ones. In writing. In front of 43 people. She wrote, "I will not have the lowly ones present at my table. I've spent 60 years building something meaningful, and I won't dilute it with people who have chosen to lack status." Lack status. Like it was a moral failing. Like being a 29-year-old single mother working night shifts while building a business from a folding desk in a living room was a character defect. 3 minutes after the message was sent, Rowan was removed from the group chat. She didn't get to respond. She didn't get to defend herself. She was read, labeled, and deleted, in that order. She told me she sat on the bed for a long time after that. Her daughter was asleep in the next room. The apartment was quiet. And she read the screenshot 4 times. Not because she didn't understand it. Because she was memorizing it. She saved it to a folder on her phone. She labeled the folder "Receipts." And then she went back to work. Because Rowan had something due in the morning. A deliverable for a client. A systems audit she'd been building for 3 weeks. And the deliverable didn't care about her mother's opinion. The deliverable cared about accuracy, methodology, and deadline. So she opened her laptop and finished it. That was 3 years before the contract proposal arrived. Let me tell you about Rowan. Not the version Nadine sold to 43 relatives. The real one. Rowan had her daughter at 25. The father left before the birth. Not dramatically, no fight, no door slam. He just stopped answering. Stopped showing up. Became a read receipt and then a disconnected number. Rowan filed for child support through the court. She received irregular payments for 8 months, then nothing. She didn't chase it. She didn't have time. She was working as an administrative assistant at a mid-sized accounting firm. Decent job. Steady paycheck. Nothing remarkable. But Rowan had a skill that her employer noticed before she did: she could find inefficiency the way some people find typos. She'd look at a workflow, billing, intake, filing, client communication, and she'd see the drag. The redundancy. The steps that existed because someone set them up in 2006 and nobody had questioned them since. Her supervisor started giving her side projects. "Rowan, can you look at why our invoicing cycle takes 19 days? Rowan, can you figure out why we're double-entering client data across 3 platforms?" She'd come back with process maps, flow diagrams, and recommendations that were so clean and logical that the partners started requesting her input on operational decisions. She didn't have a degree in systems engineering. She had a 2-year associate's degree in business administration and a brain that thought in sequences. She taught herself the rest: project management frameworks, lean methodology, Six Sigma fundamentals, database architecture. Not from a university. From textbooks she bought used online and YouTube videos she watched after her daughter went to sleep. At 27, she left the accounting firm and registered a business. A sole proprietorship. She called it, well, we'll give it a name that isn't the real one. Let's say Coreline Systems. The service offering was simple in concept and brutal in execution. She would audit a company's internal operations, billing, scheduling, inventory, communication, workflow, identify where money, time, and labor were being lost, and design optimized systems to stop the bleeding. She called it systems optimization. Her clients would later call it surgery. The first year was lean. She had 2 clients. Both were small, a dental practice and a landscaping company with 12 employees. She charged modestly because she had no portfolio and no reputation. But the results were measurable. The dental practice reduced its billing cycle from 22 days to 9. The landscaping company cut its administrative overhead by 31% in 4 months. Word moved. Not fast. Rowan didn't market. She didn't have a social media presence. She didn't post motivational quotes or behind-the-scenes content. She just delivered results, and the results moved from one business owner's mouth to another's ear. By year 2, she had 7 clients. By year 3, she had 14, a subcontractor she brought on for data migration projects, and a waiting list. Her specialty, the thing that separated her from generalist consultants, was billing leakage analysis. She had developed a proprietary methodology for auditing a company's revenue cycle and identifying exactly where money was being lost between service delivery and payment collection. Not fraud. Not theft. Leakage, the slow, invisible drain caused by miscoded invoices, missed billing windows, unapplied payments, duplicate credits, and broken follow-up sequences. The kind of loss that doesn't show up as a single dramatic event but accumulates over months and years until a company realizes it's been bleeding revenue it didn't know it was earning. She was, by any professional standard, exceptional at what she did. And nobody in her family knew. Because nobody asked. After the group chat message, Rowan stopped initiating contact with her family entirely. She didn't make a declaration. She didn't send a message. She just stopped calling, stopped texting, stopped showing up to events she was no longer invited to. The silence was mutual and total. Her mother didn't reach out. Her aunts and uncles, the 43 witnesses to her public humiliation, didn't reach out. Not one. Her daughter grew up without a grandmother. Rowan told me she explained it simply and honestly when her daughter was old enough to ask. Some people in our family decided they didn't want to be around us. That's about them, not about you. Clean. No venom. No drama. Just the fact of it. And Rowan kept building. Quietly. Methodically. The way you build something when you're not performing for an audience, when the work is the point, not the applause. 3 years passed. And then a name appeared in her inbox that she hadn't expected to see again. Nadine's company. Let's talk about Nadine's company. Nadine ran a boutique interior design firm. High-end residential and commercial work. Custom furnishings, imported materials, curated aesthetics. The kind of firm that charged a premium not because the work was necessarily superior but because the presentation was immaculate. Beautiful website. Magazine features. A client list that included minor local celebrities and a few regional developers. Nadine was, in her own way, talented. She had an eye. She could walk into a space and see what it should become. She could select a fabric, a fixture, a palette, and make a room feel like it had always been that way. Clients liked her taste. They liked her confidence. They liked the version of themselves she reflected back at them through their living rooms. What Nadine could not do, what she had never been able to do and had never considered important enough to learn, was run a business. The design firm had been operating for over 15 years. It employed 9 people full-time and contracted with a rotating pool of artisans, fabricators, and installers. Revenue was strong on paper, north of $2 million a year in gross billings. But the firm's profitability had been declining steadily for the last 5 years, and the decline had accelerated sharply in the last 18 months. The reasons were exactly the kind Rowan could have diagnosed in a single afternoon. Billing was a disaster. The firm operated on a cost-plus model, materials plus markup plus design fees, but the invoicing process was manual, inconsistent, and riddled with gaps. Projects were billed at completion rather than in stages, meaning the firm was floating material costs and labor for months before collecting payment. When invoices did go out, they were frequently incomplete, missing line items, misquoting material costs, or failing to bill for change orders that had been verbally approved but never documented. The billing leakage, the term Rowan had built her entire business around, was catastrophic. An independent review would later estimate that the firm was failing to collect between 15 and 22% of its earned revenue. On $2 million in billings, that's $300,000 to $400,000 a year in money the firm earned but never collected. Walking out the door. Every year. For years. On top of that, overhead was bloated. The firm leased a showroom that was 3 times larger than necessary. Nadine's personal expenses, travel, meals, a leased vehicle, a clothing allowance she'd written into her own compensation package, were run through the company. Not illegally, necessarily, but in a way that drained cash flow and obscured the true cost of operations. The firm had a small board of directors, 3 people, mostly friends of Nadine's from the design world who had invested modest amounts in the company early on and held minority equity positions. For years, the board had been decorative. They met twice a year, approved whatever Nadine presented, and went to lunch. But 18 months ago, the board started paying attention. Because the firm missed a quarterly distribution payment. Then it missed another. Then the accountant flagged that the firm's operating account had dropped below the minimum threshold required by its line of credit, triggering a covenant warning from the bank. The board, suddenly alert, demanded a full operational review. They hired a business advisory firm to assess the company's financial health. The advisory firm's report was 40 pages long and could be summarized in one sentence: the company is generating revenue and failing to capture it, and its cost structure is unsustainable. The advisory firm recommended that Nadine's company engage a specialist in systems optimization and billing recovery. They provided a short list of 3 firms qualified to do the work. Rowan's firm, Coreline Systems, was on that list. It was on the list because one of Rowan's former clients, the dental practice from her first year, had referred her to the advisory firm's principal. Who had referred her to another client. Who had mentioned her to a colleague on the advisory team. That's how reputations work in professional services. Not through billboards. Through results that travel from one satisfied client to the next. The advisory firm didn't know Rowan's last name meant anything. The board didn't know. And Nadine, who had no involvement in the operational review because the board had specifically sidelined her from the process, had no idea that the firm being considered to save her company was owned by the daughter she'd called lowly in front of 43 people. The contract proposal arrived in Rowan's inbox on a Monday morning. A formal RFP. Scope of work: full billing systems audit, revenue cycle optimization, and operational restructuring. Estimated engagement: 4 to 6 months. Fee structure: to be negotiated. The client company name was right there in the header. Rowan told me she read the email twice. Then she closed her laptop, walked to the kitchen, and stood at the sink for a long time, looking out the window at nothing in particular. She wasn't angry. She told me she expected to feel something hot, some rush of vindication or bitterness. But what she felt instead was something flat and clear, like looking at a math problem she already knew the answer to. She opened the folder on her phone. Receipts. She looked at the screenshot. She read it once more. Then she made a decision. If someone threw you out of the house when you were standing in the rain, told you that you were nothing, that you lacked worth, that you weren't fit to sit at their table, would you let them back in once you built the roof? Would you hold the door open for someone who locked it behind you? Subscribe if you're building your own shelter. And I'll tell you what happened when Rowan walked into that boardroom. Rowan accepted the initial meeting. Not the contract. The meeting. She told her subcontractor to prepare a preliminary review based on the publicly available financial data, the firm's annual filings, its registered credit obligations, its vendor payment history through commercial databases. Standard intake procedure for any prospective client engagement. Nothing unusual. Nothing personal. The meeting was scheduled for a Wednesday afternoon at the design firm's showroom. The board would be present. The advisory firm's principal would be present. And Nadine, because she was still the CEO, even if the board had begun to limit her authority, would be present. Rowan dressed the way she always dressed for client-facing meetings, simple, clean, professional. Dark blazer, pressed trousers, minimal jewelry. She carried a slim portfolio case. She arrived 7 minutes early. She checked in with the receptionist, accepted a glass of water, and was shown to the conference room. The board members were already seated. 3 of them. 2 women and 1 man, all in their 50s and 60s, all wearing the slightly strained expressions of people who have recently realized their investment is in danger. The advisory firm's principal, a man in his early 40s, was there, laptop open, ready to facilitate introductions. Nadine was at the head of the table. Rowan walked in. Set her portfolio case on the table. Made eye contact with each board member. Nodded to the advisory principal. And then she looked at her mother. Nadine's face went through 3 stages in about 4 seconds. Confusion, because the context was wrong, this was a business meeting, not a family encounter. Then recognition, the features, the posture, the daughter she hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Then something Rowan described as recalculation, the rapid mental processing of a person trying to figure out what this means and how to control it. Nadine didn't say Rowan's name. She said, "What is this?" The advisory principal looked between them. He didn't understand the dynamic yet. He introduced Rowan by her professional name, the name on her business cards, her firm's name, her title. He described her credentials. He described her client results. He described why his firm had recommended Coreline Systems as the top candidate for the engagement. Nadine said, more quietly this time, "I know who she is." One of the board members, the older woman seated to Nadine's left, looked at Nadine and said, "You know this consultant?" Nadine didn't answer. She was staring at Rowan with an expression that Rowan told me she'd seen before but only in different contexts, the look Nadine gave vendors who overcharged her, or assistants who made mistakes. The look that preceded control. Dominance. The assertion of hierarchy. Except this time, the hierarchy wasn't there. Because Rowan wasn't an employee. She wasn't a dependent. She wasn't a name in a group chat. She was the person the board had invited to save the company. And Nadine was the reason the company needed saving. Rowan didn't wait for the tension to resolve itself. She opened her portfolio case. She said, "Before we discuss the scope of this engagement, there's a disclosure I need to make to the board. It's material to whether this firm can accept the contract." The room went very still. She pulled out 2 documents. The first was her preliminary financial review. 6 pages. Clean, organized, dense with data. She walked the board through the top-line findings, the billing leakage rate, the revenue gap, the overhead ratio, the cash flow trajectory. She did it the way she did everything, precise, methodical, without editorializing. The numbers were the argument. She just presented them. The board members were leaning forward. The advisory principal was nodding. This was exactly what they'd hired her to do, and she was doing it in real time, unrehearsed, from a 6-page preliminary that most consultants would have charged $10,000 to produce. Then she stopped. She said, "The second document is the reason I'm declining this engagement." She placed the screenshot on the table. The group chat message. Nadine's words. The lowly ones. Lacking status. Do not reflect the values this family stands for. She turned it so the board could read it. All three of them. She gave them time. Then she said, "The CEO of this company is my mother. 3 years ago, she removed me and my daughter from our family, publicly, in front of over 40 relatives, because she considered us beneath her. She used the word lowly. She said we lacked status." She paused. Not for effect. For accuracy. She wanted every word to land clean. "I built my firm from nothing while raising a child alone. I am now being asked to use the skills I developed during the years she disowned me to save the company she neglected while she was busy deciding who in her family was worthy of her attention." She closed the portfolio case. "I'm declining this contract. And I'm formally blacklisting this company from Coreline Systems' client roster. Not because I can't do the work. Because I've learned that when someone tells you who they are in a group chat at midnight, you should believe them. My mother told me I was nothing to her. I'm respecting that decision. She will receive nothing from me." She looked at the board. Not at Nadine. At the board. "You should know that the financial issues in this company are solvable. The billing leakage alone, if corrected, would recover enough revenue to stabilize operations within 2 quarters. But solving it requires leadership that prioritizes process over ego. You have a fiduciary responsibility to the equity holders of this firm. I'd encourage you to exercise it." She stood up. She collected her documents, both of them. She left the screenshot face down on the table. And she walked out. Nadine did not speak during any of this. Not one word after, "I know who she is. Rowan told me she doesn't know what her mother's face looked like at the end because she didn't look at her. She said she'd spent 3 years learning not to look for reactions from people who never gave her the right ones, and she wasn't going to break that discipline in a conference room." The board met privately within 48 hours of Rowan's walkout. What exactly was said in that meeting, Rowan doesn't know firsthand. But she heard through the advisory principal, who called her the following week, partly to express professional respect and partly because he was genuinely stunned, that the conversation had been pointed. The board asked Nadine directly about the family situation. Nadine attempted to frame it as a personal matter that had no bearing on business operations. One of the board members, the older woman, reportedly responded that when the CEO's personal conduct causes the most qualified consultant available to refuse to work with the company, it is no longer a personal matter. It is a business liability. Within 60 days, the board restructured Nadine's role. She retained a creative director title but was removed from financial oversight. They brought in an interim operations manager. They engaged a different systems consultant, not as specialized as Rowan, not as experienced, but available and competent. The billing issues were partially addressed over the following year. Partially. The deeper structural problems, the ones Rowan could have solved in 4 months, took over 2 years and twice the cost to remediate. The firm survived. Barely. It shed 3 employees. It gave up the oversized showroom and moved into a smaller space. Its revenue dropped by 30% before stabilizing. The board members recovered a fraction of their investment. Nadine retained a minority stake but no longer ran day-to-day operations in any meaningful capacity. And the family? Rowan told me that after the boardroom meeting, she received 11 messages in 1 week. Not from Nadine. From relatives. Aunts. Cousins. People who had been in that group chat 3 years ago and said nothing. People who had watched her be erased and continued scrolling. Now they were reaching out. Some with curiosity disguised as concern, "I heard something happened at your mom's company." Some with awkward attempts at reconciliation, "We should get the family together sometime, it's been too long." One uncle sent a message that simply read, "Your mom isn't doing well. You should call her." Rowan didn't respond to any of them. Not one. She told me she typed out a response once, to the uncle. She told 43 people I was lowly. 43 people agreed by saying nothing. I'm returning the silence. But she deleted it before sending. She said it felt like explaining herself to people who hadn't earned the explanation. Her daughter is 7 now. She's in 2nd grade. She knows her mother runs a business. She knows her mother works hard. She does not know the word lowly, and Rowan intends to keep it that way. Coreline Systems has 21 active clients. Rowan has 3 full-time employees and 2 subcontractors. She moved into a proper office last year, nothing extravagant, but a real space with real desks and a door with her company's name on it. She told me she stood in the doorway the first morning and just looked at the sign for a while. She doesn't call it revenge. She doesn't call it success. She calls it the math working out. Because that's what she does. She finds the inefficiency, she removes it, and she lets the system run the way it should have been running all along. Her mother was the inefficiency. She removed her. And the system works. The thing about the word lowly is that it requires an audience. It means nothing in an empty room. It only works when there are people present to hear it and agree, or at least to stay silent, which is the same thing. Nadine needed the group chat. She needed the 43 witnesses. She needed the public stage to make the label stick. But labels don't generate revenue. They don't fix billing systems. They don't raise children or build companies or show up at 4 in the morning to finish a deliverable because a client is counting on you. Rowan never argued with the label. She just outgrew it. Quietly. Without an audience. And when the audience finally turned around to look, she was already gone. Standing in her own doorway. Reading her own name on the glass. This has been Christopher. If this one hit you somewhere real, you know what to do. I'll see you in the next one.